Good morning. My name is Joelle Newman, and I'm from here at Peaslee Neighborhood Center. As a community organization in the heart of Cincinnati, Peaslee has walked firsthand the real-life impacts that the lack of equity-based development policies has had on a historically Black and Appalachian neighborhood of working-class families. Without equity policy protections, this neighborhood alone has seen the loss of over 2,000 units of low-income housing and a substantial loss of the Black resident population. Our neighborhood is not a rarity, as the city's growth at any cost approach to development has led to Cincinnati being one of the most segregated cities in our country, with over half of our children living in poverty and 28,000 households struggling to find housing they can afford for their families. A profound crisis exists in our city, and we have no time to waste passing any legislation that maintains what has become the status quo of wreaking havoc on our Black communities, communities of color, and neighbors of low income. Councilmember Landsman's balanced development legislation does not focus on or prioritize what we know are our city's greatest public needs: decent, affordable housing and living wage jobs for Cincinnatians at the bottom of the economic ladder. The legislation, as it is currently written, lacks substantial ways to address and prioritize the harms that the racism and classism of the development industry has inflicted on people of color and working class people in our city. It is painfully obvious that the private market discriminates, which is why it should be equally obvious that our public leverage should be used to offset this behavior. The proposed legislation offers no metrics to ensure that local jobs are secured for residents who have historically been unemployed, underemployed, and underpaid. There is no effort to structure community engagement in a way that addresses major economic barriers to civic engagement, and there is no effort to ensure that community assets benefits all neighbors in our neighborhoods. We are calling on city leaders to intentionally prioritize the needs of communities of color and working class residents who are most marginalized in our city. Our community people have worked for decades to develop better solutions, and the Peaslee Equitable Development Rubric Framework offers a number of clear and easy ways that the city can embrace and adopt them, as has been shared with Councilmember Landsman and the rest of City Council members. At this critical moment, it is imperative that we have leaders that move our city to realize equity gains by implementing meaningful equity policy. We cannot support this legislation as it is currently proposed. It is time to stand against the status quo. And next we'll have Magda from the Cincinnati Interfaith Workers Center.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here, and thank you Peaslee for organizing this opposition. My name is Magda Orlando, and I'm with the Cincinnati Interfaith Workers Center, and we are here today to speak out against Councilmember Landsman's balanced development proposal. Because Landsman's vision for balanced development is a meaningless checklist that won't grow the wages for working people in Cincinnati. His balanced development, quote unquote, includes a living wages provision. Under it, a developer can get a tax break by checking a box that says it has committed that all jobs created by the project during construction and after will comply with city's living wage policy. What does committed mean? It doesn't say. Do workers making less than the living wage have rights to enforce that? Who would enforce those rights? The proposal says nothing about it. The city already has a living wage ordinance. It's the law. If Landsman wants to expand the scope of the ordinance, he should do so by getting a majority of council to amend the ordinance. Adding a box that a developer can check is an empty gesture. The Landsman proposal also allows a developer to get a tax break simply by promising to, quote, engage a partner in the labor community on construction of the project. What does engage mean? Labor organizations are supposed to sell their services to developers. Maybe it means that labor unions are supposed to service developers with volunteer hours. And who in this labor community is actually included in what Landsman refers to? Is it labor unions? Or are nonprofit groups included? Would the Partnership for a Competitive Workforce satisfy this element? And what does good wages actually even mean? Again, the city has municipal prevailing wage law. Is Landsman proposing to expand this or amend it? No. All he wants is a box to check for developers to check on their way to the bank. The CIWC leads a coalition of community and labor organizations called Just Pay Cincy. Just Pay Cincy came together in 2015 to establish a city wage theft ordinance. Many Just Pay coalition partners work in construction trades and see close up how disgusting the existing development process is, the campaign donations, the priority treatment for the rich, the hand-holding and coddling of developers. When Landsman was running for city council, he came to a Just Pay meeting and pledged that he would work to increase the staff in the department charged with local labor standards enforcement. It's now 2021. The staff dedicated to labor standards enforcement has not grown. They have not expanded any capacity for oversight to making sure that the existing laws on their books against wage theft and for living wages are being enforced. And now 3 city council members have been arrested for development crimes. Landsman's answer to all of this is to have members of the labor community become volunteers for developers. Obviously, the Landsman proposal is a step back from working people. It is just more of the same anti-worker, classist, and racist status quo. Now, there are alternatives. In 2017, so almost 4 years ago now, members of the Community Act Now Coalition and the Peaslee Neighborhood Center met with Just Pay Cincy. They met with us and with our labor union partners. They sought meaningful input from working people on how to do development differently. These suggestions were incorporated and are now part of the equitable development rubric. That's why it's so strong. Unlike the rubric, the Landsman proposal is an empty shell. It demonstrates a complete lack of engagement with working people and their unions. His proposal sends a message to developers that as long as nobody looks too closely, they will not even be held to a minimum standard required by law. It fosters the existing culture of corruption, encourages a race to the bottom mentality, and it won't lead to good wages, stronger enforcement of prevailing wages, or an expansion of living wages for working people in our city. We're here in solidarity because fighting for equitable development is fighting for justice for working people. Equitable development and building affordable housing goes hand in hand with protecting workers' rights, creating good jobs at living wages. They are 2 sides of the same coin. I'm going to turn it over now to Jenna from Community Matters.
Hi, my name is Jenna Hippensteel, and I work at Community Matters in Lower Price Hill. For years, I've heard from our neighbors about the persistent need for quality, affordable housing in our neighborhood. I've spent years sitting through community council meetings, listening to people present about new development projects coming to the neighborhood, telling our neighbors what's coming to their community instead of asking for their insights. Some of them were actually good development projects that brought jobs and cleaned up brownfields in the neighborhood. But people were by and large suspicious of projects causing undue friction at the start of each development. And it's because developers have never needed to share details about how much money they're asking for from the city, or how many 1, 2, or 3-bedroom units their projects will bring to the community, or whether housing units they will bring will be affordable to a family of 4 with one person earning $20 an hour, or affordable for a family of 4 with one person earning $100,000 per year. Developers don't have to ask community members what they think along the way in planning their project. They just need to make a presentation at the very end of the process. We like development. It can be done in a way that lifts up our priorities and the priorities of our neighbors, like affordable housing and engaging community members during the project planning process. Right now, though, the way developers get city support for their projects doesn't reflect these priorities. We know that there are members of City Council who support affordable housing and greater community input throughout the development process. However, while Councilmember Landsman's current balanced development legislation may name the priorities of affordable housing and community input, it doesn't add anything in the way of holding developers accountable to these priorities. Instead of passing this piece of legislation, we need City Council to continue working towards specific, actionable plan items of how developers will be held to higher standards in our communities. We can and need to do better by our neighbors. Let's keep working. Next is Ted.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you, Peasley, for letting me speak on behalf. My name is Ted Levitt, speaking on behalf of the Liberty and Elm Coalition, which is a diverse group of local folks who specifically worked for more affordable housing on the Liberty and Elm project. First, Jenna, you mentioned an interesting thing, an important point. We are all pro-development here. What we're really for is objective development with affordable housing, which is not what we're getting. Councilmember Landsman states that the outcome of the Liberty and Elm project would have been different with his proposal, scorecard, whatever you want to call it. That is just not a true statement. A large group of us worked through this project, and we worked on the basis of actual numbers, trying to get into the details to understand what the developer needs, wants, and should expect from the city. The response from both the developer and the city was obfuscation, confusion. They had no interest in the details. If you look specifically at this scorecard, it's more of the same. Just to pick a couple of examples, it talks about balanced housing production, which has lots of numbers about different AMI percentages, but no requirement as to what you need. If you look at these other cities that have been mentioned, Portland, Oregon, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Charlotte, North Carolina, they have very specific requirements for doing things in return for what you get. The second one is improvement of vacant blighted properties. Well, I think we've all learned here that everything passes that one. The point is, this is too subjective. We need objective standards that we'll all benefit from. It'll help clarify our expectations, the developers know how to work with it, and it'll pin the city down to something specific. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mona Jenkins, and I am with the Homeless Coalition. I became active with CAN, Communities Act Now, and with the Peasley rubric a couple of years ago. And it's based on personal experience. And I believe that the people closest to the problem are the closest to the solution. I was familiar with the rubric while myself being displaced out of Walnut Hills. And because I was one of the first people to be displaced, I contacted Jen and said, hey, I know you all have a rubric. I don't want this happening to anyone else in my neighborhood. And I started thinking about the elders. And I started thinking about the kids who go to the neighborhood school and how housing would affect their learning and their development. I thought about the elders who would lose the resources that they've been using for so many years in our neighborhood and how they would lose those connections. And so I asked if we could start using the rubric in Walnut Hills. Let's try to prevent displacement. Let's try to keep the diversity in Walnut Hills. And so when I went to council and introduced this, other neighbors were like, you know what? We don't want to move out of this neighborhood. We do need to do something. And this rubric gave a little bit of power to the people. And I think that's what the problem is that the city is scared of the power of the people. I'm telling you now, we are still being nice. Because we are still trying to work with the city in saying, hey, the people who are most affected by displacement, the people who are most affected by homelessness have come up with a solution. Let's try to work together. I was with Jen in front of City Hall when we met Greg and said, hey, we have a possible solution. Let's see what we can do with this to make it not only usable in Walnut Hills and Over the Rhine and other neighborhoods that have already started using this. Let's do this citywide. Let's close this 28,000 gap in affordable housing. Let's stop me from having to call the coroner's office on a regular basis to see who has died overnight due to freezing temperatures. I don't want to make those calls anymore. And I know the city has not, and maybe that's what they need to do to be motivated to do something beyond these symbolic gestures. We are asking for racial equity. We are asking for affordable housing, and it can't be done when you're simply handing folks crumbs, when you're simply doing the bare minimum. City, you told us that our immigrant families were relevant when you made this a sanctuary city. But yet so many folks on the west side are getting displaced. So that's a symbolic gesture with no meaning behind it whatsoever. You painted Black Lives Matter in front of City Hall, yet I have still yet to see that my Black Lives Matters when there are folks that are still experiencing homelessness, when 75% of the folks that are on the streets are Black and dying. We're not saying this just to have our words be heard but not listened to. You raised a flag saying that Black people matter. Black History Month was last month. You raised it for 10 days. We won't talk about that. But again, a symbolic gesture that has no meaning behind it. This proposal of Landsman is another one. We can't keep letting these come up and not say anything. We can't keep letting these come up and people are not included. When Jen and I met with Greg, he said, oh, we'll look into this. Who is we? Because all of these people here today are we. The people on the streets are we. Who are the we? Because we have been left out of these conversations. And those closest to the problem have been left out of the conversation and need to be at the table. Again, symbolic gestures. Maybe we don't need to be at these tables, and maybe we need to start flipping them and creating our own. And that's what we're at the point of. And we can do that. But we're saying one last time, that we need to address these issues with some meaningful policies. We don't want surface level things. These are life and death. Hear us now. And we want the people to have an understanding that this is for you, by you. This is what true democracy looks like. Quit leaving us out of the conversations and make us the forefront. Thank you. Next up is Jen with the Peasy Center. Jen Summers.
Oh, that's right. Hi, my name is Jennifer Summers, and I have the privilege of working here at Peasy Neighborhood Center alongside of so many of the other folks who have spoken today. I just want to say a little bit about when I think about why we are where we are, and when I say that, I mean Peasy. We're a community hub that knows a little bit, and some folks would argue that we know a lot about development. When this school building was going to become a vacant building, moms in our community didn't wait to deal with the problems of a vacant building or a vacant school. They knew what solutions they needed. They knew that their educational resource needed to be here long-term in their community. And so they organized and they got together and they bought this building outright, and not just for profit, not just for one specific break off a piece, of the pie for me, but for the long term, for our community, for children that attended the school, for moms and folks everyday people who put a lot of energy in. And over these 35 years, we have continued doing development, human development in this building. And when I talk about the moment that we're in now in terms of how Peaslee specifically got here, doing this discussion about development, which may seem like a disjoint for some folks. Again, our kids ask us that question. They ask us, why are our basketball courts being sold for $1 to a developer? How did that happen? And because we are a community of educators, we had to go get educated. And we had to go start doing work and finding out why. And that effort led to the work that we're doing now and the work with the equitable development rubric. So, and all of that work also is grounded in years and years of experience of community people, for all the things that have already been said, who haven't sat on the sidelines, have engaged with their community and said, I care about what's being built here, and worked and advocated to have a right to say what's in their neighborhood, to have a right to say that the thing that comes to their neighborhood better be for me. It better be for me, and when it's done, I better be able to still be here. And so I just wanted to say that a little bit about why Peaslee is in this work. And also, we are in this work for the long term. And I am here to tell you that community councils and residents in neighborhoods across the city are in this work for the long term, because this is where we live. We live in the city. And working class people in communities of color will not go away. We will continue to work to make sure that we are, because we know that we are a part of that solution, and it is sorely lacking at City Council. That solution is structural. That is why people are indicted by the FBI right now. The structure is broken. And this policy that we are opposing today, because folks who know Peaslee might know that we don't do a lot of press conferences. It's not like our main thing. But we are here today because we cannot let it stand. I'll just pause for a second.
It's an emergency. First Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
Right. We can't let it stand. We're close. To have the long-term work of community people be called something that it's not. And again, we are not one to stand on the sidelines. We have shown up. We have put our work out there. We have spent that time mostly in neighborhoods, right? But then at City Council, they have all of this in their hands, right? As Mona already spoke of. And there wasn't a lot of interest about structurally changing or looking at development policies until people were indicted. And so that is why we are here today. And what we have been very disappointed, but also tried to impact, is changing what gets put out. We've been unsuccessful in doing that. From the time that this piece of legislation that's called balanced development, from the time that it was first introduced semi-publicly, not to the broader public, but just to some small community groups, there have been 3 changes. One change was to strip community councils of their power. The second change was to name it the rubric, which is the community work that we have been doing to confuse the public about what it is about. And the third change was to add some historic preservation bullet points. We could get no other changes on affordable housing, no other changes on labor standards and jobs, okay? No other changes that even said that there's a yes or no, did I do this? So this is not enough. It is not enough for our children in our building. It is not enough for families in our community trying to make a way and be a part of their communities. And the last thing that I just want to ask folks today is to take some action steps, because we can all participate in making our city better and demanding more and saying that what you're trying to serve up is not enough. It is the status quo. It has got to go, because we are moving forward as a city with everybody in this city and with people at the center who who you've been ignoring for 20 years. So if you could please take some action, our action steps today, you can, if you so desire, there is a, Councilmember Landsman is having a community town hall tomorrow. You can sign up and register to go to that town hall. It is only one day before your last opportunity to speak. So the broader public thing is only one day before your last opportunity to speak on it, before they try and vote on it at City Council. So the Budget and Finance Committee is on Monday, so you can sign up to speak there as well. And then City Council will be on Wednesday, and you can sign up to speak there as well. Also, you can make a phone call, you can send an email, and please register your opposition to this non-reform in our city and demand true equity, true transparency, and a city that allows working people to live in the city that they build, maintain, and care for every day. Thank you all for being here.